Hey creatives, Karen here, mixed media artist and creative at By the Wolf Moon. I figured out how to do a video of me creating a piece of art and also talk at the same time, and that is to do the two completely separately. So yay me, I figured out the technology. Basically, this video here is following on from the last video in which I talked about the whole coming home to self process not being all sunshine and roses, and that the artwork that we were probably going to create wasn't all going to be pretty, I guess. And I wanted to create a piece of art in my journal to kind of close off that last video for myself and the thoughts that I discussed in that video, and that period in my life I kind of wanted to put it into a piece of art for myself. So that's what I'm doing here today. I decided to record the whole process so that you can see it from start to finish, although there are some parts in the video where I thought I was recording and I actually wasn't, so it will be a little bit disjointed, but I'll try and explain what I've done that you can't see as we go along. So in this part of the video I'm basically just putting down my base layer on my altered book page. So I have 3 pages of my book glued together here, and I am gluing down just small squares of paper that I've torn up. Usually I would just use pictures for colour, but in this case I decided I really wanted to have some text blocks as well, so I'm using a mixture of both, and basically it's just to cover up any white on the page. I want the background to have some sort of colour to it, whether that's text or images, so that's what I'm doing here. This spread is a plain page on the left, and then the right has I've made 2 pockets out of single book pages that will be glued down when I've finished painting or creating on them. So I'm just using Mod Podge to glue down these small squares of paper, and you can basically do it however you want to do it. It doesn't have to be all uniform. You don't have to cover the whole page. You can do it however you like. This is just how I am doing it for this page. And also I prefer to tear my pieces of paper rather than cut them with scissors. It's just a more organic kind of feel to the page. So the thing with creating a page like this, which has lots of layers, is it's important to remember that every single part is important. So even though these layers that I'm putting down now, we're not going to be able to see at the end of it, it's still really important to take your time and think about what you're doing here, because it all adds to the energy of the finished piece of art. I think I've said before that I really love gluing and pasting paper to paper. I don't know why, but I find it really, really calming and really enjoyable. So I always really love starting a new page in an altered book because I get to do this process here. So there you can see the first pocket, the second pocket, and then this is the back page that the pockets will actually be glued down to. And you can also see that I'm only gluing these extra pieces of paper onto the parts of the page that are bare, that have a lot of white. So where there were already photographs on the page, I'm just keeping those photographs in the background rather than pasting more pages over top of them. This piece of art that I'm creating today is probably one of the darker pieces that I have created for quite a while now in actual paper art. My clothing that I make tends to be much more darker than the art I put onto paper, because that's my personal aesthetic, and so I love to wear those sorts of clothes. And I think that's a reflection of the headspace I'm in at the moment, which is a much lighter, sort of freer, more peaceful space, and so my artwork is also much lighter and more fun, I think. So here in my altered book pages, I also love to do a layer of fabric. And the reason I do that is because fabric is so important to me. It's such a huge part of my life. I really love textiles. So this is a completely unnecessary part if you know, I only do this because I love adding that energy and that part of myself into my art. So you can leave out this step if you want to, or if you also love fabric and have fabric lying around, then by all means go for it. So the fabric that I use is scraps from you know, things that I have made. So the kind of tie-dye one that you see there in the middle is from a quilt that I've made for my daughter. There's some fabric in there that was from a dress I made for her for a wedding, and there's some other bits and pieces from other pieces of clothing I've made. Now I'm just tearing off the edges of the pages and adding more fabric onto the tops of those pockets. Obviously you don't need to, I don't need to do any layering on the parts of the page that are going to be the inside of the pocket. That's not going to be seen, and it'll just add unnecessary bulk. And this art journal is already getting pretty thick and bulky, which I actually really love, but I do want to be able to finish the book, and it will get harder and harder to work in as I get nearer and nearer the back. So I don't want to add any more bulk than is absolutely necessary, really. You'll see that I leave all the threads on the fabric, and I just leave them hanging off the page, or you know, covering the page however they fall is how I leave them. It just all adds texture, and I love a lot of texture in my work. So there, that's all finished now with the fabric layer, and now I am going to gesso over the whole lot, starting with the back page, the base page for the pockets. And again, I'm only gessoing where the part that is going to be visible on the page, and then slightly into the pocket. And here I'm just using a piece of brown paper to give some texture to the gesso. It's all about the texture. I just love running my hands over a page and feeling all the bumps and, you know, all the layers and stuff like that. So I'm going to do the same thing for all of the pages with that brown piece of paper. And then that piece of paper I actually will use as my paint palette. So rather than using a you know, washing away all the excess paint when I'm finished with it, I use a piece of paper and I paint all the excess paint onto that, and then that piece of paper becomes a background for, or you know, something that I use in other pieces of art. It's all about sustainability and usability, and you know, finding tools and mediums to use in everything. Right, so then I forgot to video the bit where I was inking this page, but basically the green and the copper are just an ink that I have sponged onto the page. And now I'm about to, and that has been the background for all the pages in the book. So all the pages start with that, and it adds some continuity. So even though each page is really different, doing the same base painted background does give it some continuity, because you will see that green and copper coming through, even if it's just the smallest part of the page. So I think that that's important when you're doing a book of art rather than just individual pieces. Now I'm just using acrylic paint, which I've mixed with a liquid varnish to thin it down, and this is going to become the background of my artwork today. you can see me painting that out onto that piece of paper that I used for giving texture to the gesso when I'm finished with that blue paint. This is an image that I have taken from a magazine that I picked up at an op shop. I think it was a photographic magazine, and this is one of the images in here which I really felt represented what I wanted to portray in this art piece today. So again, I prefer to tear all my edges rather than cut them, just for that organic feel. I think I've said it before that I am a messy crafter, and I really am. You'll be able to see that today. Messy and clumsy often. And also, I'm not too fussed about what gets added to the page, or like if there are drips on the page. So here you'll see I dripped water, paint water all over the page. It doesn't bother me because again, it just all adds to the layers and elements on the page. Here I'm just Mod Podging this image on, and I didn't bother washing out my brush too well. I just used the same brush that I painted the blue background, and that's because I really wanted this image to blend in really well. So you'll see as we go along what I mean by that. And then I'm just wiping off a bit of the excess that covered the image, because this was an image from a glossy magazine. It's easy enough to wipe off any paint that's on there that I didn't want, or any extra Mod Podge or anything like that. But again, it doesn't bother me that there were some colors, some of the color stayed on the image. I tend to like more grungy artwork, so that works for me. Now I'm just taking a couple of other paint colors, and you'll see by the colors the tone this page is about to take. So this is a very dark brown, and then I have a sludgy kind of grey, and I think I am going to use a very dark indigo blue color as well, or it's kind of blue black, which is one of my favorite colors. I love blue black. If I can figure out how to get blue black hair, I will have blue black hair one day. And again, I'm just going around the edge of this image, blending it in as much as I can to the background to make it look like it was there all along and meant to be there. I don't want to just have it look like something I've torn out of a magazine and stuck on the page. So if I explain a little bit about my thinking process while I was doing this art piece, so I really wanted to depict the time that I was talking about in my last video in this series, about when I was in a really dark place, and really no one, as much as my friends and family tried to help me, they really couldn't. And so I kind of wanted to depict that in an image, kind of how that felt to me. So I always feel like at that time I was in really thick, heavy mud, and I couldn't get out. You know, it didn't matter what I did, I was held in this mud and just stuck there. and so that's kind of why I'm using these colors. I wanted it to look like, you know, mud or dirty water or somewhere not entirely pleasant. The other thing I want to say is I wouldn't usually explain my artwork. I think the person viewing the art should take from it what they want, but because this is part of the Coming Home to Self series, I feel like it's important for me to explain my thought processes while I'm creating art, so that you can see how this activity it's helping me get my what goes around and around in my head onto paper, and then I get to leave it on the paper and I don't have to take it away with me. And if I want to revisit it again, I can come back and look at that page, or I can, if I'm flipping through the book randomly and come across that page, it's a reminder of, you know, how far I've come, or something like that. So I finished now with the dark paint, and I'm actually decided to get some twine. I don't know where these ideas come from. They just pop in my head and I think, yep, I'm going to do that. So I've got some lengths of twine here, and I'm just tying knots in it. And what I felt these were representing were the, you know, the life ropes that the people around me were throwing at me. You know, they were I had people around me trying to drag me out of this place I was in, and they just couldn't. So that's kind of the lifelines from the people around me trying to help, is what those ropes represented. Oh, so there, I skipped a bit of the video there, I'm sorry, and these grey boxes down the bottom, you'll see a little bit later, they're going to represent weights keeping me where I am. And then I've painted a grey kind of wall on that middle pocket there, a grey stone wall, which represents the barrier that I felt was between me and the rest of the world. It was kind of between me and the good place, me and where everyone else was. So that's in there. And then I have this raven that I have also taken from a magazine and am gluing down now. That represented to me it kind of represents, this is going to be hard to explain, but it kind of represents my faith. It kind of represents the creator of all that is, who is on the other side of the wall, just waiting patiently, knowing that I will find my way. You know, just waiting and looking on, but not interfering, and just very wisely knowing that I will find my way. So that's what that raven represents to me in this image. And the other thing that I've done here is in the top left corner you can see a little bit of orange, and that was the representation of the light that I always knew was there, couldn't necessarily see or feel all of the time, but I never lost completely 100% lost my faith. I admit that it got right down to maybe, you know, 2 or 3% faith, but it was always there in the background. So I wanted to include that in there as well. Now I'm just adding some shading with a charcoal pencil around the crow, so that he's not just sitting out there in no man's land. And now I'm going to, I'm just adding in some kind of like rope wrapped around these grey heavy stones, and they will be, and then I'll just add some like lines where they're attaching to me, and it just represents the feeling of being really weighed down and stuck. I also want to point out that these, if you are doing an art journal and following along this process of coming home to self, it's really important that your artwork is truly authentic, that you're not worried about the finished piece and how good it looks, or if someone will understand what it means. For one, no one else ever has to see this work if you don't want them to. But for secondly, this exercise is all about being completely authentic and unafraid to explore yourself. And so you can't be worried that what you're creating doesn't look technically like what you were intending it to look like. So for example, the grey stones that I've or blocks that I'm outlining now, they don't look, you probably would never have known they were blocks and what they represented unless you'd listened to me explain it to you. And so but that's, and I could have done them, much better, I'm sure, and there are plenty of artists out there who are much better artists than I am, but the point of this whole exercise is to be authentic and to create the work for you. If you remember back to the first or second video that I did, this is a very selfish process. This is entirely and completely about you and no one else. So whatever it is you're putting on the page and what it represents, and that's all that matters. The last thing that I would want is for you to feel like your work isn't good enough, because it most definitely is. Now I'm just gluing down those pockets to the base page there, and I think I've glued on those ropes now as well, and I am unsticking that page from the page behind it. And what am I doing now? Oh, see, now I'm just smoothing out all that leftover excess paint that I have on that scrap of paper, and then that page I'll use another time in art somewhere. I'll keep adding to it probably. And now I'm just smudging around the edges of the page with my charcoal pencil. The other thing that this page reminded me of, with the woman there down in the mud, was the analogy of being of a seed having to be planted in the mud, in the dark before it starts to grow. And I almost went that route with adding some roots and a little shoot of a plant coming out, but changed my mind. and went this way instead, much more abstract. Oh, now is another bit that I thought I was videoing and I wasn't. So basically all I've done is taken a piece of the scrap paper that I've painted on here, and I am stamping letters on it, and the letters spell out, the letters are completely random and they're all jumbled up, but they spell out words: opportunity, chance, choice, luck. They're all words that I really felt were missing from my life at this time, and so I have put them all in a jumble at the bottom of this brick wall, kind of like they were there for me if I had chosen to see them and put them together, but I didn't, and so they just lay scattered and fallen at the bottom of the wall. And now I'm just writing a line from a quote that I really loved at this time, and it is a quote from Jeremy Goldberg, who is the founder of Long Distance Love Bombs, which you can find on Instagram. He's really amazing and a really amazing writer and poet, and one of his poems, I've actually carried it with me in my wallet for the last 5 years, because I wanted it with me at all times. And then just today you'll see, so this is a line from that quote, and then at the end of this video you'll see that I have the quote and I put it into one of these pockets, and that's going to be its new home now. And the quote is, it goes something, I don't have it with me right now, but it's something along the lines of, there are ghosts in my veins where gods used to reign. And I just really love that line of poetry. So I've put it on the page because we all know I love a good quote. Can't have too many. And then I think that is just about it for this page. So that, oh, now I'm going to get the bits and pieces for the pocket. So this is that poem I was just talking about from Jeremy at Long Distance Love Bombs. So I'm keeping that in the pocket there. I'm also putting in another poem that I found and resonated with me at the time and have also been carrying in my wallet. I'm putting that into one of the pockets, and another poem from a long time ago, maybe 20 years ago, that I sent to my friend when she wasn't feeling great, and then she sent it back to me during this time in my life. And then I have a picture of my son when he was a baby,